You're live.
Huh?
You're live.
Oh, live, okay, we'll call the meeting to order then. And the approval of the agenda and order of business, and there's one, the water program verbal update 6.3, and that's it for me.
I'll move we approve the agenda with the amendment.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. Public input, and Jennifer, I understand you have a letter you wish to read.
It's from Gerald Bremner. And he writes, to Chester Municipal Council, I am Gerald C. Bremner Sr., and I own property located at 3 Island View Road in East Chester, which has been migrated to the Nova Scotia Land Registration Act. This property is located next door to a property owned by Sharon Bremner that is located at 134 Chester Commons Road. I am writing this letter to provide some very important details which were not disclosed when Sharon Bremner appeared before council on September 8th, 2022, regarding her concerns over a surveying property line issue. Over 25 years ago, there was an extensive and very costly civil litigation, SBW number 2229 in brackets, which went through the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia over a property line dispute between the owners of the previously mentioned properties. This civil litigation was resolved in February 1997. Part of this resolution included the signing of releases by all parties, including Sharon Bremner, which indicated there would be no further actions, causes of action, claims, and demands whatsoever, including all claims arising from the property dispute. The Supreme Court of Nova Scotia, SBW number 2229 in brackets, issued an order under the Quieting of Titles Act, which included an exact and very detailed description of each property and the location of each survey marker referred to in the order as Schedule A and B. Schedule A is my property description and is based on a survey that was conducted on March of 1991 by Arthur C. Bachman. Schedule B is Sharon Bremner's property description. Each schedule makes reference to the 49.5-foot wide road reserve being lands of the municipality of Chester and referred to during the discussion at council on September 8th, 2022 as the unopened road. All parties involved, including Sharon Bremner, were satisfied with the property lines 25 years ago as clearly outlined in the Supreme Court order. Also, at the time when the municipality was giving the unopened road to adjoining property owners, my now deceased mother, Marjorie Bremner, and I made the decision to not accept one half of the unopened road that we were actually entitled to. This was done as a gesture of goodwill and allowed Sharon Bremner to receive the entire portion of the unopened road. Sincerely, signed Gerald C. Bremner Sr., 74 Pig Loop Road, Chester, Nova Scotia, B0J1J0.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it has Sam.
Yes, so we'll have some in-camera legal advice on the 29th. Sam couldn't be here today, so when he's back, we'll have a report.
Interesting new information, so. Okay, so we'll deal with that when Sam is available. Okay, I'm gonna jump right down to 6.1 before our first appointment.
Hello.
Hey. There's a new copy of it.
My application, that I don't need to carry a fair bit of time.
See, I can be, or I can be short, because I'm just asking for you to direct me to
Well-
write the report. Whatever you would like.
You just start.
Okay,
Well, Sid is next and he doesn't mind.
okay,
No, carry
No.
okay,
He's easy to get along with.
okay, so over
As
the
long as you give
last,
him what he wants. Anyway.
can you find it?
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll just start talking. So over the last year, or so staff have identified some amendments that would improve the clarity and administration of the municipal land use bylaw and the village land use bylaw. So all these amendments are minor in nature and can be accomplished without amending anything outlined in the municipal planning strategy. So staff are requesting direction from council to direct staff to prepare a report and draft amendments to both the municipal LUB and the village LUB. And that's all in the list that I have in the report here. So again, this is just a preliminary report outlining all of the amendments that we would like to do, assuming that you give direction for staff to write the report. So I'm just gonna hit on those. I will go into the discussion because again, later when I come back with a report, I'll go into more detail on all of them.
Yeah.
So the first one is within the definition section of the municipal land use bylaw. So we're just looking to revise the definition of tourist homes, and then align in the general provisions on the use of tourism homes. The second one there, it'll be an amendment to both the municipal land use bylaw and the village within the intent of zone boundaries, so that we're just looking to revise wording to address the adoption of revised maps from time to time to reflect improved data when it's updated from the province. The third one there is again, municipal and village. This is in the waivers and exceptions sections. We're looking to add language explaining that certain bylaws are exempt from land use bylaw provisions, including but not limited to mobile vending, uniform signage, and outdoor dining. The next one is private storage section within the municipal land use bylaw. So that one we're looking to use single unit dwelling setbacks as standards for private storage, and that's just to make things more uniform within the whole document. Next one is within the lakefront overlay section in the municipal land use bylaw. So we're looking to one, clarify that any development on a lot subject to the lakefront overlay requires a development permit. And then two, to revise the lot coverage language, just to reflect that any area covered by the lakefront overlay, not the entire lot, we're looking at impervial surfaces for that one. So the next one, we're almost there, is section 6.4.1. This is all in the SR2 permitted uses and developments. So we've just got a couple amendments just to, again, make everything uniform and cohesive. So we're looking to list campgrounds and RV parks as permitted uses in that zone, and then limit them to 10 per lot and impose a 10-meter setback equal to those found in the hamlet zones, again, just to mirror other zones. And then again, in the same section of the municipal land use bylaw, we're looking to revise the setbacks for 3 to 11 dwelling units a lot from the current 1.5 to 3 meters, and then for the tourism accommodation setbacks from 7 to 7.5 meters to match the mixed use zone requirements. So that again, everything's more uniform and cohesive. Almost last one. So second last, we're in the mixed use permitted uses and developments section in the municipal land use bylaw. So we're looking to revise language for larger campgrounds and RV parks to 21 or more sites. Right now, it's got more than 21 sites and up to 21 sites. So virtually anyone that wanted to do a 21 site campground wouldn't be allowed right now within the land use bylaw. And the last one is in the lakeside zone. So we're looking to add waterfront parks not owned by the municipality by development agreement to the list of permitted uses. And this is again, just to mirror the other zones and have everything cohesive. So if you wish to proceed with the list of amendments, staff will prepare a report for consideration. That'll go to both municipal and village planning advisory committees. Well, first, it'll go through the whole amendment process. So we'll have a public information meeting. We'll do the joint planning advisory committees. It'll come back to you. That's where I'll go into more detail. And then we'll have a public hearing.
Anybody have any questions or concerns?
I have a question.
Okay.
Oh,
It's not live.
you spelled something wrong.
No.
It's possible.
Not, we say most of the amendments are minor in nature, I agree. Some of them aren't so minor.
Okay.
Which ones do you think are going to be the controversial? And they're looking at one of the tourist home, section 2.0.
Mhm.
You'd consider that one minor in nature as well? Seems to be pretty substantial. But,
Okay, just changing the definition of it or the name or which part?
well, they just say particularly around Airbnbs and the RVO rental
Mhm.
units. That's going to create a lot of discussion, I would think.
It certainly could create discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not regulating them in any manner. We're just
Oh, I understand.
changing the term because it's often.
But, you know, when you say most are minor, you consider all of them minor. I mean, that's,
Okay,
I'm just, when you say most of them, you seem to indicate that some of them may not be minor. So just language.
absolutely. And when I was reading it, I actually crossed it out when I was verbally saying it. So yeah, I agree.
Anyway, I think we have to take this forward, but I do believe some of these will
Some of
create
them
some.
And
Just the very fact that Airbnbs are mentioned will
Yeah.
cause it to.
Yeah. No,
Just, I have a question. Counselor Wells is complete, or you have more questions?
no, well, I'll wait for the public participation part.
Just one regarding, what is a waterfront park? Is that just, I'm not sure, park on the water or what?
Basically, yeah, so I don't actually have a definition in front of me, but it's like let's say on Sherbrooke Lake, another municipality owns a piece of land and they want to put a park, define park there.
Where
We might
people
be able
have
to touch on
access
it
to it.
better.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Water access.
Morning, council. Yeah, so just to provide a little bit of clarification on that, because Emily has inherited some of these that came from a variety of other files, and the Lakeside Zone was the one where this originated. So if you remember back to the situation with the District of Lunenburg and the proposed park on Sherbrooke Lake, and then there was quite a kerfuffle there, which ended in a memorandum of understanding with us. And at that point, we undertook an amendment to all of our zones to include language that said waterfront parks that are not owned by us, by the District of Chester, must go through a development agreement process. And in the creation of the Lakeside Zone, that was overlooked essentially. So when we got there, we realized we've just done all this work to protect Sherbrooke Lake, and now we've actually created a bit of a loophole to allow a
So
park to
putting
be.
it back in.
Yeah, so we're just putting this back in. That provision is in every other zone we have because of that situation with the District of Lunenburg.
Just while Gareth is there, he can probably answer this. Where your Hamlet zone and 10-meter setbacks, so we're gonna add that to the SR2 zone? Is that the intent on at 6.41? List campgrounds in every park is permitted use and so on, and it says impose 10-meter setbacks equal to those found in the Hamlet zone.
Right, so yeah, kind of like Emily was mentioning there, a couple of these changes are so we kind of have a hierarchy of our zones and how they go from sort of Hamlet, single unit and Hamlet all the way down. And we noticed in a few cases, there were setbacks or provisions that didn't match sort of the level they were at. And so that was the case here. So campgrounds and RV parks were actually more regulated in mixed use than they were in SR2.
Yeah.
And so this intent, what we'll do here is tighten up campgrounds in SR2 so that they're more consistent with how you'd expect that zoning hierarchy to work.
Is that classified as a minor change? I guess that's my question, or is that gonna take that?
I think this would speak to the first question as well. That's subjective. We can avoid writing our reports in that way if council's going to have issues with that. That was our intent to say that all of these are meant to be minor. That's why we're bringing them forward as housekeeping. We wouldn't bring a major change forward as part of a housekeeping amendment. So we do consider them all to be minor, and we're happy to discuss them as they go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
No.
So do you want to accept the recommendation, get a staff report?
Yes,
Yes.
motion to move option one.
Second,
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank you. Mahone Islands Conservation Association, Sid.
Excellent.
John Miser.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. My name is Sid Demerick,
No.
very happy resident of Chester. And I would like to introduce Sandy, who you all know, but.
Yes, Sandy, hadn't seen you in a
Nothing
little
happens.
while.
Nothing happens without Sandy in my life, so very important. And Sandy has two cousins, cousin Judah and cousin Ann, visiting cousins.
You're just here to see what's going on?
And this is John Meisner, the chairman of MICA, and Brian Palsherman, the manager of the Moorings Movement.
And vice chair. And vice chair.
And vice chair, so this will be a lot more fun than the last one.
Okay.
First of all, you're still the best council in Nova Scotia.
So you always start
No
like that,
doubt.
just to.
So usually when I come before you, I'm asking you for something.
Yes,
Today, I'm giving you something.
and we're still the best. Well, that's why you're giving it to us.
I would like to present you with two plaques
Oh, good.
to go on the wall. And may I read them?
Yes.
Birch Island, Birch Island was acquired by the Mahone Islands Conservation Association in March of 2022 in partnership with the province of Nova Scotia with significant support from the municipality of Chester.
Says that right on there?
Right there.
Yeah.
Title is held by the province. A stewardship agreement between the province and Mica ensures the island will be conserved and available for traditional public use. September 2022. So I'd like to present these to you.
What's the other one say?
The other one says the same thing, but it says Squid Island.
Oh,
We're
okay.
catching up.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to work with you.
Thank you for all your support.
Thank you for what
I'd like
you
to get a
do.
photograph there.
You should get a photograph.
Yeah.
We should probably grab one too.
Great idea.
Part of the Queen.
Take them all.
Get rid of the plastic.
You want to hold one?
Yeah, I'd love to. All right.
1, 2, 3. And one more.
Yeah. Pretty
Oh,
rare.
okay.
Try one more.
Yeah, we're gonna get a couple.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. So we do have a small ask today. We couldn't-
Oh, yeah.
John is going to present.
Well, thank you very much, Warden Weber, Dan CAO, and all the Chester councilors. We really certainly appreciate your past support, particularly on the acquisition of Squid Island and most recently on Birch Island. And we commend Sid for just his wonderful communications with you folks here. But we're here to talk about moorings and public moorings, and we sent around a brief, I believe, that was distributed to council, so you folks have a little background, but I can just give you a brief background. Right now, I think our count is 25 island properties or shoreline properties that we've acquired with partners for conservation and traditional public use. And we've acquired those properties. Our organization started 2003, and our most recent, of course, was Birch Island, which was a wonderful accomplishment. When we acquired those properties, there were very few private moorings around these islands, with the exception of the Lips Islands, and that's a cluster of 4 islands off the end of Second Peninsula, owned by the Long Island Preservation Society, which is a group of Lunenburg folks. And at the time, they had a couple of moorings for their own use. About 10 years ago, they said, look, we're all getting old. We'd like to donate these islands to Mica, which is great. Also in Bachman's Island, and some of you are familiar with Bachman's Island, that's essentially the party island in Mahone Bay. Had, when we acquired that island, had maybe a small handful of moorings. It's now got like 15 or 20. So over time, people have just dropped private moorings around these islands, and we explained in our brief the issues Mica has with those moorings. We initially thought ideally we'd like there to be no moorings around any Mica islands at all, but we quickly understood that that wasn't probably a practical way to go ahead. So we've been working with Nova Scotia Natural Resources and municipality of Lunenburg to register moorings around the Mica Islands that would be available for public use. So we're very, very pleased that the Natural Resources allowed us to register those moorings, and the municipality district of Lunenburg working with us to place moorings around the Mica Islands in Mahone Bay, in municipality of Lunenburg. So we have 2 islands in municipality of Chester, being Birch and Squid, and we're here to ask if you would work with us in providing public moorings around those islands. And maybe I'm just going to flip it over to Brian, who is our vice chair and has been heading up managing our mooring initiative with the municipality. If you'd care to provide a few details on that arrangement, Brian.
Yes, John mentioned that we went through the process of applying to there is a formal registration process within the Department of Natural Resources.
I bet you most of the private ones weren't formally registered.
Quite correct. And not only that, we have an arrangement with the departments that they will not accept any requests for registrations off the Mica Islands.
Yeah.
We've also been working with DNR to try and deal with the issue of the illegal moorings or non-registered moorings or private moorings, however you care to describe them. And some of you will be on a tour we have arranged pretty shortly with the Minister of Natural Resources and the Deputy and MLAs and so on to have a look at that problem and how to deal with it. Meanwhile, we have a program now underway for the placement of the initial set of moorings. We are going to be dropping about 6 moorings this fall. It's a complex process to get this all set up, but the moorings will be bright yellow with a public and 6-inch high letters around them. The locations have all been agreed. It's taken a long time to get the process through the municipality, but we have a roadmap now of how that happens, and some of that's mentioned in the background material that you received. So the hope is that we will gradually work our way into the so-called private moorings, and through an education process and through offers that we would gradually persuade some to relinquish them or convert them over to public moorings. Of course, these are all in the most favored spots, so naturally. So any progress we can make on that, and that might flow from this tour that we have of the islands coming up. So far as we would hope that the process that has been in place, arranged with the municipality of District of Lunenburg, would be a template that you might be willing to follow. And that template arrangement is that we offer to fund up to 50% of the cost of moorings. Moorings typically cost about $1,500. That's rough. That's the rough number to have them created and dropped. All standard size, all the same moorings, everyone identical, everyone having a notice on them that you use them at your own risk. That the bottom weight is 2,000 pounds. All the standard shackles and mooring tenders and so on. So in the case of the municipality of Lunenburg, the list is 24 moorings in all. The rest we hope to accomplish next year early on. Of course, because of work around the workloads of the various marina operators for haul out and launch periods, so we have to get them in early and or late. And they also have to be removed at year end just to sustain them.
They don't have to be taken out once they're in there.
They don't have to be, but the usual process is to sink the chain,
Yeah.
leave a small float on top to preserve the quality of the chain and whatnot. Separately, there will be an agreement for maintenance of these moorings with the municipality, so that has yet to be negotiated. But basically, it'd be something along the lines of every 2 years they go out and check the mooring quality chain and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, we have a 2-year period, and we have an experience that we can draw on from the 6 which will be dropped in the next couple of weeks. So I think that's the bulk of where we're at the moment. Are there any questions that I could?
Well, I don't have any specific to that, but you're looking at 2 islands, birch and squid here
That's
to
correct.
put moorings. Are there any private moorings here now? I just don't remember.
Yes, there are.
There are.
Not on Birch.
Not in birch and squid.
The report from the other night was there were 4 off squid.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've
a
seen.
couple years ago, there were none.
Yes. So how many would you be looking at for them?
4. Two on birch, 2 on squid. We have to determine the location on birch first, but it looks like 2. So that'd be a cost of $6,000, of which we contribute half.
So it's 3,000.
Yes.
And then it's important that you folks who wind up owning them, and having title to them. That's as your agent is with Municipality of Lunenburg.
And every 2 years, will you be replacing something there?
Well, typically on moorings, the chains are checked, that's the part that tends to rust out. There could be wearing on the bridles, that's the line that runs from the float to the boat itself. But basically the entire mooring will be checked every, or I would say, at appropriate periods as judged by the professional marine contractors that will be used for.
So it'd be a cement block in the water.
It was a 2,000 ton cement
You're
block.
not gonna read.
5/8, the block wouldn't come out typically. Once in a while, they may dive on them once in a while, but mostly the.
Just to make sure the chain's still. good.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
My experience is you get 5 to 10 years out of it
Yeah,
before you have to refix the chain.
yeah. I mean, I know that it's different for anything we own than it is what the private sector owns, but they
Yeah.
don't do that for us. They're there for 20 years and they don't do anything.
I guess I could add that the contractors that are being used by the contractors being used by the municipal district of Lunenburg has to be workman's compensation and insured
Yeah,
and so on.
it's always more complicated for us. Yeah.
And if I can add, yes, there is quite a, I think, significant documentation that municipality of Lunenburg used in the procurement tendering process that I'm pretty sure will be available for you folks
Specifications.
to review and.
So we have to decide if we want to get into the market.
If we even want to do, it, yeah.
Yes.
And I can only speak for myself. I think we should, but that's.
Yeah,
Well, we own these islands and we're encouraging the public to use them.
we don't know.
And we.
No,
well,
we
we're-
contributed to
We're
it.
partnership with them,
That's right, we don't.
but we want the public to use them.
Yes.
So we have to make this, I think we need to make this available so that someone can go out on a boat and go in. If not, you're gonna get more private moorings showing up
Mhm.
to most popular islands.
I think this would be quite, I think it'd be very popular and quite frankly, many people that have boats are terrified of anchoring. So
Well,
that's
that's-
another reason why they drop the home, right, and doing moors are so much easier, of course.
Yeah, and some of them you can get up on, but anyway, some you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just say that, in principle, I agree with everything that's been said in terms of providing public access. And there has been a proliferation of privately held moorings that has blocked access.
Exactly.
And, I find that I do a little boating. So I understand that issue well. We don't currently have any moorings. And so this is sort of, for us, it's new ground. And although it may be posted on a mooring, use at your own risk, I think that the public holds government to a level that may be higher than a business or a private citizen. So I'm not sure that putting a tag on a mooring would actually protect us from that risk. And I think that we would have to go away from this meeting and discuss what our insurer
What do they think?
about that. And boats are very expensive things. And mine isn't, but some are.
Yeah.
So to me, that's something we have to understand well before this council could make a firm commitment. Reading the mood of the room, I think that many of us are in agreement that we want to offer this access. And every time we've added floats or added boat launches or anything, it's been very popular with the residents because they want to have access to the water. And we want it, like the Chester Golf Club, when it was given and that citizen made that available to the local residents. That I think that's part of the spirit of our community. We want to make these things available to everyday person. So
Yeah, so I do agree. There's obviously a duty of care there to the public, and that's why we rely on the recommendations of professional marine contractors, not our own ideas about what these moorings should be comprised of to be safe and disclosed. And that's usually the litmus test of any challenges to that, from damages that might result.
So in short, to summarize, I feel like I'm in favor of this with a caveat that I think that we need to have a report back
staff.
from staff on what exactly this means to us. Maybe it's no big deal.
You gotta talk to the
And it's
insurance company.
A small amount of money, and like the capital cost of the moorings is really not, I don't feel like that's a big issue. And even the ongoing maintenance cost, I think, is manageable probably, but there are some liabilities associated with a structure like this, and just as long as we understand what that is, I think that we may get support here.
I think those are logical steps, in your due diligence to understand.
Adele,
Thank you. I just was wondering, you're looking at 4 now.
Mhm.
What, do you have a long-term plan for any more? What do you
Well,
see?
when we acquire several more islands in the.
But these particular 2 are 4 is what you're looking for a limit at this point?
That's correct.
Okay.
Gary? Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just thinking of, because if it comes to pass, we put 4 there and we have, a lot of usage. I don't know how that would be interested in putting more there.
Well, there's always the opportunity to do so, as long as it adequately separates it, then there's space to do so.
Yes.
And the places where people want to be,
Okay.
which is typically off beaches and easy landing points and so on.
Okay.
Derek and then Andre again.
It'll probably be obvious from my questions that I'm not a voter, so forgive me. How do you regulate them? I mean, you put 4. And I think part of it, Andre mentioned, our floats and other things. Part of the issue we have with that is there's never enough. So how do you, if you're gonna have 4, the first come, first serve, is gonna be an hour at a time, you're gonna let them there for a week. How's it gonna work?
It's clearly not a management issue. It's an education issue of how we can persuade people to be reasonable and share, which would be on the tags attached to the moorings. Also, that we hope there'll be a certain amount of literature out that will help explain what these are for and why they're there, and how the public can contribute to their both financially and in terms of welcoming others to these moorings. So we will not be going around timing people on moorings. We will not be going around saying this mooring costs so much per hour or whatever it is. We will certainly invite them to contribute to the cost of the program, and we'll certainly, as I say, reference the need to share and be polite and pleasant users. I can't remember. I don't have the exact wording.
Basically, we're saying, what we say in the tag,
That's what I'm just trying to remember.
don't monopolize use. I think, again, this is a proposed tag right now, so we're just in the final stages of that. Please do not monopolize its use and have considerations for others. So as Brian says, this is gonna need a communication program, which we're intending to do this fall and this winter, to get beyond our membership, because we believe a large percentage of people that are at these private moorings down are not MICA members. So, and keep in mind, we're a group of volunteers as well. Our association works all by volunteers. So that's one of our goals this fall, winter, and spring, is just a communication program around these moorings and to try to get basically reach out to the various yacht clubs too, to try to encourage those people to become members of MICA, so then that we all part of the whole communication program. But it's on an honor system, and again, it's we believe in keeping things simple, and knocking my head to date, it's I think worked pretty well for our organization. So
the municipality will be issuing a release on the moorings, which will include this sort of messaging as well. We'd also hope to get some press coverage as the moorings are dropped, and we do attend things like the boat show, where we have the opportunity to more broadly describe what we have and what the usage is.
Sid, you want to say something then?
Yes, I have to leave for a doctor's appointment. I'm not leaving because I'm mad. I'm very pleased with what's going.
Well, it sounds like we're going to move forward. We just need some detail from staff on it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, here, the one comment I would say is, first for Derek's benefit, the moorings are like a lot of these islands are really close to the mainland, so most users, or many users now have craft that can land on the beach, so they wouldn't use the moorings. These are for folks that have deep drafts or boats like sailboats or like larger craft that you can't beach. So there are many users right now at these islands that just will take a small boat and land.
I get that, I'm just not a boater, I go on a lot of boats, and I just sit there and, you know.
So,
I'm not crew, right? I'm guest. But I also have.
There's always gonna be abuse.
And
yeah,
that's what I'm concerned about. Are we gonna have to deal I mean, we got enough trouble enforcing bylaws now. We don't have to be enforcing this. And those are the questions I have. And I think Dan knows where I'm coming from, because I've raised that with him.
Yeah,
before.
what's it mean to staff, you know?
and when I guess that I wanted to build on something I think that Bella maybe touched on also is that, you know, we actually have, these are micro islands we're discussing today and the need for this. There's a real need. And I think we can agree that this is like an emerging problem that is private moorings. But they also exist for the islands that our municipality owns, which is their own islands. So, you know, maybe if this is something we want to, as a council, to support and eventually own these moorings on Micah Islands, we may want to look at whether we want to add some mooring, expand it to islands that are owned by the municipality of Chester as well.
Yeah.
You know, it obviously, if it makes sense for a Micah Island, it makes sense for a Chester Island.
Yeah, because we bought them for the sole purpose of let the public have access.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this would be a good model if we can sort of them to use for,
And the other thing, just the last number of years, the activity around our islands and on the bay, it just seemed to increase, you know, exponentially in the last 4 or 5 years. It's, you know.
So how do you guys feel that you're gonna, or Department of Natural Resources are gonna deal with the illegal moorings there? Is that might be a big issue.
That is going to be an issue, and right from day one, they said, advised us to try to communicate, which we've been doing, but we have a tour on the 27th with the Minister of Natural Resources, Deputy Minister, and local staff, so we'll be talking about a plan there. And we want to be careful how we do that, because we don't want Micah to become the enemies of you know, a couple handfuls of people that have private moorings down. So we're essentially going to try to communicate to them, and some of those moorings may be appropriate to be converted over to public moorings in terms of gear and the specifications of them. So that's one of the things we're going to try to encourage.
How do you figure out who has the moorings, or is it just local knowledge, you know, who have the illegal, like the actual person that has the illegal?
So there are telephone numbers and some, but I'd say we
Because they're
don't
not
really
registered,
know
obviously,
who owns very many, if any. Now, we have, again, a couple of years ago, we began the communication process in terms of these illegal private moorings, and some of them were removed as a result of that, which we're very, very thankful
I want to be careful using the word illegal, 'cause I'm not sure they're illegal. They're private.
they don't have permits.
And they
of.
don't
And they're
have
not
permits.
registered.
They're not registered.
Yes.
That registration process is a relatively new
Okay,
process. That's not something you always had to do.
okay.
And so some of them, they've been there for a long, I mean, I think we better call them private. I think
Right, yeah.
illegal means breaking the law, and I'm not sure they are.
Well, that's
So
right.
be careful using that word.
Yeah.
I don't know, they may be, but I think we should be careful using that until we know a little more about them. Sure.
So do we generally think we want to move forward with it, subject to some information being provided from staff on what it would mean to us and what the insurance company has to say?
I think we need to discuss it.
Okay, so that's what we'll do.
Well, thank you so much again for this morning project. Thank you, and thank you for your past support in the acquisition project. So hopefully you folks get out and enjoy the islands that we've acquired together in partnership. So
Yeah, no, thank you for what you do.
You know where we are through Sid, if you have any questions.
We have no trouble finding.
Thank you very much. folks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah. Just before we do anything else, minutes of the previous meeting, August the 4th. Forgot about that.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. And now the 9:15 point, we're running a little late, obviously. So shore tourism.
Good morning.
That was all more or less about social tourism.
Exactly. It all comes back to tourism. What a great segue.
Very little
Yeah.
time to tourists. Always love coming and seeing the ox yoke at the mall. Okay, so you have the presentation up there.
Yeah.
Got notes here. Our executive director couldn't be here today. She was supposed to deliver this, so she's really the nuts and bolts of the operation, but we're gonna power through this. I'm here as the chair of South Shore Tourism Cooperative today, and Johnny is former chair of South Shore Tourism Cooperative, has more experience with it than I do, let's say. What we're basically getting at is the offer opportunity request to transform the current support for us from a project base to a line item base. And we'll spend a few slides explaining why we think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So we have, I guess it's next slide or first slide, whichever is number one. So South Shore Tourism Cooperative is an innovative approach to helping position Nova Scotia's beautiful South Shore. So really, we do slice off a bit of Peggy's Cove and go all the way down to Barrington. For the year-round destination traveler, and we're focusing a lot on year-round services. We're trying to build that up as part of the economic package for the South Shore. We believe in the power of collaboration and building on collective strengths, investments, and resources to market the region. So there's an underlying theme here of the power of cooperation and the scalability of this kind of cooperation lens. So we're here today to ask that you be a supporter and an advisor and take on an advisory role, like a fixed advisory role with our board, and be instrumental in the success of our efforts as a whole rather than funding specific projects. So right now I'm on slide 4. So what are the capacity building possibilities? Lucy Lobster, wherever Lucy Lobster went. Lucy Lobster's busy crawling around. On Groundhog Day, Nova Scotia Lobster Crawl celebrates its 5th anniversary in February 2023. It's now a month-long visitor experience. This anchor product that makes South Shore a February destination, this weather permitting, of course, is promoted year-round. So there are lobster events that happen in July and August and this sort of thing. We've been reaching out to businesses up and down the South Shore to get involved in that map of events. So we're acting as a coordinating and facilitating body in that respect. While Nova Scotia Lobster Crawl is coordinated and facilitated by South Shore Tourism, it benefits the entire region. Calendaring and promoting events such as Chester's For the Love of Lobster have been highly successful and visited by travel media from around the world because of collective efforts. We had quite a few, I don't remember how many, at the Lobster Chowdown, what's it called? I can never pronounce
I
it.
could never get that one either. Lobster
Anyway,
Chowdown Showdown.
The Lobster Chowdown Showdown at Forest Heights back before COVID was.
Lobster chowder.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, I used to go taste it all.
Oh, fantastic. And we had influencers there. South Shore Tourism Cooperative promoted that. And it was quite a nice event. We'll be getting back to those in-person events now that the COVID regulatory system is sort of past us. So the modified Lobster Crawl for 2022 was still able to host the signature events, the lobster roll-off and the tail end party. And when participating businesses were surveyed, we found 57% of the businesses were first-time participants. So this is a growth series of events, let's say. All businesses participating saw increases in media coverage and social media engagement. 78.6% of the businesses saw new customers in February during the pandemic. So we're taking that as a sign that this is a growth event. We've had quite a lot of marketing people in on this to sort of have you scale this up to a worldwide or world-class month of events on the South Shore. We're now on slide 5. I was down there putting barrels on the deck just last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. So because of past funding, we also own and manage the tourism website, visit southshore.ca, a regionally collaborative site using a Show Me Map platform. So, for example, Ross Farm is on there for things to do in the museum world on the South Shore between Peggy's Cove and Barrington, and we get access that way to the volume of followers at southshore.ca. Those planning for dreaming or
planning for or dreaming of their visit to the South Shore, use this site, accessing our festival and event calendar, places to stay, the bucket list of things to do, and lobster crawl. I've got a guy, radio DJ coming in for, don't call them DJs anymore. Anyway, radio host from Minnesota coming in next week, and I'll be plugging him into the list of things for him and his wife to do as he interviews people up and down. On that website, the top July page visit numbers show that 5,317 people visited for the very first time. 90.2% were Canadians. 46% of them used their desktop computer, indicating they were pre-planning for future visits. Actually, this roughly maps into, except for the desktop, most of Ross Farms visitors use desktops, but that's pretty close to how we're doing. So things are getting back to normal, and South Shore tourism is really well positioned because of what we were doing during COVID to meet that sort of scale up in the tourism industry. So on slide 6, there we go. The foundation is also has been laid for a business directory. Regional government, chambers of commerce, and boards of trade may now build upon this foundation, with initial cost having been shouldered already by the South Shore Tourism Cooperative. So we're doing things that we can put our money into that will benefit the partners and the people in our network. And slide 8, social media logos. Being a consistent line item supporter of South Shore Tourism also means you'll be social, you'll get talked about, and you'll be followed. So as well as the actual, in-person network that we provide and help scale, our social media followers are also a part of that. With 2 Facebook pages and nearly 10,000 followers, we reach over 22,000 people. We reached over 22,000 people on July 2nd. Our Instagram pages have over 8,200 followers, and newsletter Shore Things, emailed bi-weekly, has nearly 28,000 subscribers. So 28,000 people generators. And that's all over Atlantic Canada and some people beyond. On slide 9. In 2021 and 22 fiscal year, we received project funding from ACOA, Discover Nova Scotia, Develop Halifax, and Destination Canada, Tourism Nova Scotia, in amounts exceeding $290,000. So we're breaking those funds into projects that do affect the entire South Shore, and what I guess we're here to talk to you about is how Chester can play a role in that. On slide 10, that's maybe slide 11 then. I think that's the next one. Numbers here are out of order. So for the 2022-23 fiscal year, we've confirmed funding from ACOA and Tourism Nova Scotia exceeding $575,000. Our project focus remains Nova Scotia lobster crawl in its year-round permutations. The bucket list, and we have a Mi'kmaq project as well as a labor shortage human resources study. So we've been working with Katie First Nations directly, as a municipality and as Ross Farm, surveying, studying, and including Mi'kmaq tourism initiatives in the way we speak about tourism. That certainly has lined up with things I'm doing at the other end of Gold River and things that Parks and Rec have been doing down here. The bucket list is a wide open initiative that basically says, if you've got ideas that you can create a package for, like what are the best sandwiches in Chester, where are the best pizza places up and down, the 103, or find all the ox yolks on public display in municipal buildings or something like that. If you can create a series of things that you can package, we can help market it. And Ross Farm actually got to make the buckets for that, which was kind of nice for us. But it's a wide open way of taking things that happen on either side of the either side of the 103 along the South Shore, and relating them and getting them out to our 28,000 people on our mailing list and through our social media, this sort of thing. We're taking a sort of an effective approach, let's say, to the labor shortage project. There are 28 good studies already on the labor shortage, so we're not studying why there's a labor shortage. We're helping our partners understand what they can do about it and helping coordinate what they can do about it. So we're moving in that direction with the labor shortage study. The Evergreen Festival activities, I know there's always been a kind of, and this hits hits home for New Ross. There's been a kind of bit of a tug of war maybe between HRM and us in terms of Christmas festivals and that sort of thing. But through the tourism cooperative, we can work together on leveraging HRM citizens to come down to our areas to look at, our Christmas tree producers and our Christmas markets and Christmas festivals. And that follows the same kind of, what would you call that? The technical or digital tools we have for lobster crawl. So there are maps and there are coordinated communications that happen around the evergreen festivals.
And again, so the evergreen and the lobster crawl are kind of pillaring the busy season. So it's all about pulling, tourism throughout those times when we're starting to slow down to try to really get that year round
That's right.
destination. So it just pulls it a little bit further. Yeah.
We do provide, and this is an example, we do provide another voice at the same tables, let's say. So when Tourism Nova Scotia has an initiative or has a function or has a motivational tool that they put out to tourism operators, and we think it does or does not make sense, then we can take our voice for our members to that table and say, why are you incentivizing people closing down early when you should be incentivizing people staying open and helping, therefore, the jobs continue through the shoulder seasons and helping brand us better as a destination. So we get to wear, for our members, we get to wear a number of different hats. And although often we find ourselves speaking to the same people, it does mean you get an extra calendar date at that meeting. So project funding thus far has not been difficult for us to find. Municipality support and membership fees allow us to cover day-to-day expenses. The expenses that allow us to apply for that funding, manage that funding, and work collaboratively to market the South Shore. And then on to the next slide. So currently we have 90 members, 8 municipalities and regions, towns. We work very well with COA, Tourism Nova Scotia, Tourism Industry of Nova Scotia. And as a museum, this is all sort of falling under our Ministry of Community Culture, Tourism and Heritage, who's just taken over tourism and film. So there are lots of reasons that South Shore Tourism Cooperative has ended up speaking to that division of the government, and certainly having more opportunities to speak is a good thing. These are the current issues in tourism, the current issues in the labor force, the current issues in a lot of our socioeconomics are integrated and complex. And if I just go as a museum, I will have a tiny piece of the story. And if I go just as a hotel, let's say, then I'll have another tiny piece of the story. But if we can go consistently in a network fashion, then we're going to be more effective, or at least the message will be communicated more effectively. So we currently have 90 members, the highest number of members that we've ever had at the 6-month mark. We expect that number to double and potentially reach 200 as we proceed into fall and the lobster crawl promotion comes to bear. We have 5 municipalities and towns: Barrington, Shelburne, Queens, Bridgewater, Lunenburg, other than Chester, who supports our efforts through projects, and we work in great partnership with the COA, TNS, and the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia, as well as other stakeholders. On to, I believe, the last slide. There we go. There's Carol Hansen with the Capitol House Academy. So our ask today is that the 2022-2023 fiscal year begins a new relationship where your very kind support becomes, which has been project-based in the past, becomes general support, a line item in the amount for the 22-23 fiscal year of $4,221.66. Line item support, the same as the other municipalities, towns, and regions, really helps us out with planning operationally in a way that project support sort of comes and goes. So there's a great effectiveness, I think, in terms of the consistency of the line item support, revenue project support, and a bit of savings in terms of not having to do all the processing of projects annually. So line item support gives Chester a seat at the board table in a way that the project funding doesn't, in an advisory capacity. So we have, that gives you the ability to influence the decision making. Say, actually, you know, while you're talking about X, Y, Z for Barrington, you know, this is an issue in Chester that needs to be addressed. Let's put that on the table. So advisory services for the board, committee participation, and it gives you a structured position in cooperative that's growing and becoming more consolidated and popular among South Shore tourism businesses. And I'm going to stop there so we can use your time, open it up to
I
questions.
just asked staff because my memory's not that good. Did we used to be a member? Yeah, I thought we were, and then things changed and whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Life happens.
Yeah, yeah, like happened, yeah. Yeah, well, what would you consider to be our contribution if we were to become a member?
I think the price tag on it, and I don't understand all of these calculations because they were calculations based on a system, I guess, before my time. But it's $4,221.66, which is oddly specific.
It's, yeah, it's an old formula that came maybe from,
Population.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use population, we use.
Yeah.
Something like that.
and
So-
again, sort of, so with regards to how those numbers sort of come about. So last year, we sort of undertook a membership and a fee review and that sort of thing. So, you know, the municipalities and the towns that were sitting around the table came together and sort of agreed on what this fee structure would look like. So, you know, sort of the behind the scenes thing as well. If Chester is sitting at the table, then they have some input into the discussions as well.
So I'm gonna make the wild assumption that if we were to become members, that we would still end up contributing to all the projects.
No, so I mean, a lot of there's all, you know, we're never gonna turn you down if you want to sponsor lobster crawl.
No,
but,
no,
you
but I mean,
know.
we're doing that now outside of it, and to a degree.
So I don't understand
Well, you say we're only project based at the moment.
so I think like last year, yeah, you would have contributed to lobster crawl, I think was the
Yes, yeah.
project, so that
Yeah.
would have been where all those funds and all participation would be. We would not be coming back and looking for project support through lobster crawl.
Okay.
We have that funding right now through ACOA. We do have some major sponsors hopefully coming on board. It's very positive that they're gonna come on board this year, some businesses and stuff. So no, we are not going back out. We do not go back out to the municipalities and ask for funding on the projects.
I mean, I know we do a lot of our own tourism related.
Of course, yeah.
And I expect we can.
And we just want to leverage that, right? We just want to take that and leverage it out across the South Shore and be able to, you know, maybe promote Chester a little bit more on the website. So right now, any businesses that are members would be on the website, but Chester as a region is not really that pronounced, but as, you know, as a municipal partner, there'd be the opportunity to sort of, you know, do Chester as a region. Yeah.
And it does things like, so for, you know, Olivia, if she needed to go and talk to the tourism people in the department, then she can do that, but then come back again through us. And you've got 2 calendar dates with the same people saying, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we scale Chester municipality into the rest of the South Shore. And this is why we think the government should support us. Or down the other direction, this is why we think you, Chester business, should work with us to scale up your market to include all of those people that, you know,
You know,
I shouldn't say fingers crossed or not crossed, but that come off the cat or have come off the cat or are touring the, you know, the southern toe of the province or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think we'll make a decision here today. I mean, in the general sense, I think our municipalities generally wants to work with our other municipal partners to accomplish what we can for all on behalf of all of this. But I also think that in this particular case, we're gonna want to have a chat with our economic development staff before we make a decision.
Absolutely.
And just, I mean, you know, of course, it does go, again, it's supporting the day-to-day of the cooperative. All that funding that we get is project-based, you know.
Yeah.
We hope that you see that there's a value in having a destination marketing. We're accessing a lot of funds that wouldn't be accessible if there wasn't a organization such as South Shore Tourism. So, you know, if South Shore Tourism goes away, I think it does leave a really big void.
Yeah, we'd have to find some other ways municipal units to.
To collaborate, and I mean, we have and you'd lose lobster crawl, you'd lose your Visit South Shore, you'd lose your Think Local and.
Oh, yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, no,
I'm not sure exactly who you listed as partners. are you going to approach them this year also, the other municipalities that aren't members? Like, I don't think you mentioned Lunenburg, I don't think.
Yeah, so Lunenburg, we're always in talks with Lunenburg. Lunenburg is on the Board of Trade as part of the municipality, part of the cooperative. I'm not sure where I know we are talking to Lunenburg right now, because yeah, Lunenburg's another one that's been, you know, that we're always sort of, I think they've come on as a member, is that on their list? So not as a municipal partner, but as a member.
I guess before we have our discussion, do we have a list of who the partners are, just for?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, for sure, yeah.
And what your annual budget is.
Yeah,
So yeah, we can get you always, we have a sales and marketing operation plan that we can forward along. It changes based on, like say last year it was a $275,000, this year it's a $575,000 budget. So depends on our funding and our projects that we're getting through ACOA and towards the next mission.
so I guess, yeah, we'll just have a report from staff on where we all are, take a look at that information. And like I said, I mean, we generally speaking, do want to cooperate with the rest of the municipalities and.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for the work you do.
Thanks very
So
much for having us.
I know we work with you anyway.
We've seen each other somewhere before.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Good stuff.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you for
very
your
much.
time.
Okay, now I got a 9:30 appointment now, I guess.
Yeah.
A little late, but whatever. SBM architecture report.
Am I able to advance the slides or will someone do that for me? I can just say, next slide, please.
Yeah.
Oh, either way, I'm happy either way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. I run out of battery, so. Wait my arms. Thank you, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to present the built form and character defining element study for Chester Village, which is in your council package. Yeah.
We got a lot of slides.
I think it's 17 slides.
Yes.
So I'll try and do that in less than 17 minutes. A minute a slide is usually my guideline. I wanted to acknowledge that we worked on this project with a team of FBM architects and planners, along with Novita Interparis Heritage Consultants and CBCL, in coordination with Garth and the planning team here at the municipality. So as a broad overview of what I'll speak to today and the contents of the package, we went through a 3-phase program of analysis and principles in winter to spring 2020. We did a series of engagement events in May 2022, and we're here today with policy considerations that we've developed through this work. And that word considerations is really an important word. We haven't come to you with policy recommendations so much as options and ideas to inform the plan review process that's ongoing for Chester Village. So I'll go through each of these topics through my slides here. In terms of analysis and principles that first work, as you may know, back in summer of 2021, the plan review had a survey with 251 responses. And some of those questions on the survey asked about community character. And through that, we got some insights as to what the residents of Chester felt was important to character. Some of those elements were a focus on the waterfront, on dwellings and trees and landscaping. The general tidiness and sense of pride of the community was recognized. The walkability and walking experience within the central village especially was important. And connected to that, those village destinations and amenities, as well as a number of historical buildings, some of which are on the right side of the slide, many of them dating back as early as the 1770s. A handful of them back to the 1770s, but more from the 1800s and 1900s as well. So those historical buildings and landmarks are really important to the feel and the identity of Chester Village, which we've attempted to describe in this study. At the outset of the study, we started to identify some character areas in the community that were really apparent. And those are generally circled in the bubble diagram on the map. And just for your knowledge, the background of that map is the zoning for Chester Village.
Yeah.
But the larger bubbles are what we identified as the character areas. And in some cases, those really do match up with zoning, and in some cases, they encompass a number of zones. There is, as you know, as we're aware, a strong street grid, and traditional street grid that was laid out in the 1700s in Chester Village, and that's really important to the character. That there is this regular street grid of generally tree-lined streets, as you'll really see in the second photo on the right side of a very sort of traditional street grid of front yards, houses, strong amount of street trees with varying sizes of lots. Coming into what you might call the commercial core of the village, around Pleasant Duke, and Queen Street areas is what we've termed the village commercial core. And that's the image on the bottom of generally shops or mixed use buildings that are fronting the street. And that's really the activity core of the village, along with those connections to the water, which are very key. Also highlighted on the map in purple are the what's currently known as the estates residential zone. So those are those large lot residential lots, often along the water. This map also really indicates in a diagrammatic way the importance of views and connections to the water through those view arrows to the water. The village is often experienced, as we know, from the water, from boats, as well as from land out into the sea. And also indicated on this map are some of those waterfront zones, the waterfront residential in a light blue, which is much of the perimeter of Chester Village, and on the back harbor, the marine industrial zone is also indicated. There is in dotted lines the Highway 3 development area, which was not a consideration of this study, but we understand the municipality is undergoing some work on the Highway 3 area. I won't list them all here, but through our work, we identified 27 frequently observed character elements looking at Chester Village and the various houses and sites. We divided these into 3 categories. One category being what you might consider the landscape or the seascape category, that connection to the site design and landscaping and topography. Another element is the building design. So there is a great deal of New England stylistic influences in the architecture. Things like distinctive chimneys, solariums and verandas, use of the water, the use of wood cladding are some of those building design aspects that were character defining as based on our study. And the third category of characteristics that we looked at might be called the social or community aspects, which is what are the sort of social structures that are characteristic to Chester Village. So some of those would be things like the pride of place and the care that people take in their landscaping. Also the seasonality of the population in Chester Village, the connection to the water as well. So this is just some of those images that we took in both winter and summer to document those character defining elements. Through our work working with our heritage consultant, we also developed 4 guiding principles for village character and compatibility. And this is especially principles that can guide future development or consideration of policy changes. Those guiding principles are on the screen here. One being that new change is appropriate and complementary. So that's contributing to some of that historical context information that I described before. Second being that design is timeless and authentic. So that's thinking about principles of proportion, form, materiality in new construction. Another being that new changes are sensitive to the landscape and the seascape. So that's respecting topography, context, existing trees, and connection to adjacent areas. And the final principle is continuity and change, so that as new changes are contemplated, that they're reflecting contemporary needs as well as contemporary construction practices. Through our engagement, I think it's noteworthy that it was generally felt that these principles did hit the mark as to where the community saw us needing to go. But for people, it was really about, the proof was really in the regulations, kind of where the rubber hits the road, and how are these implemented through policy. With that, I'll talk a little bit about community engagement. As I mentioned before, this was mainly focused in May, which is the point after which we had completed much of our analysis, but before developing some of the policy considerations I'll get into in the following slides. In May, we had 60 interactions through a survey on the website. We had 2 community meetings, one in the afternoon and one in the evening, and those were both virtual and in person. We had a series of stakeholder meetings with the Merchants Group, the Garden Club, and the Heritage Society. And we also met with the Village Planning Committee. And generally that feedback was agreement with those principles, and a sense that we had identified correctly the character areas, and we had identified those frequently observed elements correctly. The engagement really focused on some of the specific objectives that residents had for Chester Village as it evolved over time. There was a major theme of that those conversations was around scale and pace of change. A lot of people felt that newly constructed buildings were of a scale that didn't necessarily reflect what they saw as the community character, and that, in a sense, change was maybe happening too fast in some ways. There was a lot of conversation around design, style, materiality, windows, building massing, so the overall shape and form of the building, height, and roofs. Those themes about landscape, topography, and connection to the water were very important. So the importance of trees, for example. There was a desirability for ensuring there was housing options so that there was multi-generational chances to live in the community. So, as people, for example, would become empty nesters, that there would be an option for them to move into a smaller option. And at the same time, there'd be options for families and workers to live in the village. Some of that conversation was also on supporting the village commercial core area and ensuring that there was a critical mass of activity in the commercial core of Chester Village. And around maintaining that sense of pride and sense of community throughout the area. So some of that came around to ensuring that there's still kids going to the elementary school from the village. There was definitely a lot of conversation around Airbnbs and concerns around short-term rentals as well. So all of those are related to community character, whether thinking of community character in terms of that connection to the landscape and connection to the context, community character in terms of building styles and building design, or in terms of the overall community connections and social connections that people have. So I will, in the remainder of my presentation, very briefly touch on the policy considerations that were highlighted in the study. The study does go into more depth on all of these, but just for the interest of time, I'll very briefly run through them, and we'll have some discussion to kind of dig into the details as we see fit. And these policy considerations, once again, are not necessarily recommendations, but rather ideas to continue through the conversation on the basis of what we analyzed and what we heard here. So the first theme for policy considerations is on building heights and roof shape. And those potential changes or considerations would be rethinking the methods for calculating building height from how it's currently calculated. Consideration that there might be a variation in heights in different areas of the village. So some blocks might have a certain height, other blocks might have a different height. So that'd be height precincts, perhaps as a different way of looking at versus zoning, and zoning being consistent heights across all areas. And other methods for considering roof slopes. The image in front of you shows some of those varieties of roof slopes that we have right now in Chester Village, from what we might consider low slope, which is at the back to the right on the screen, to moderate slope or steeply sloped in the forefront. The next policy consideration was on the appropriateness of the current land use bylaw, which requires massing, aggregated massing for structures over 1,500 square feet footprint. So what that means is that if a structure has a footprint greater than 1,500 square feet, the roof lines have to show some variation. And that idea is sometimes referred to as aggregated massing. So it, instead of looking like one large monolithic building, it looks like a building of parts. And so the policy consideration is that that seems to be working well as it currently stands. Policy consideration around materials and glazing. As you might be aware, there is currently a limit on what's termed as vertically oriented siding in Chester Village. And what we found through our work was that limit on vertically oriented siding may not be serving Chester Village that effectively. And there might be a consideration instead on, say, a limit for lower quality siding materials. So that, for example, might be a limit on vinyl siding as another way to consider the quality of cladding in Chester Village. Another consideration that came out of the conversations was about a size limit of glazing per building face. So that's really saying, you might have a limit of a certain percentage of glazing on one side of your building. That should be kind of taken with a bit of consideration, though, however, of the importance of Solaria and that view to the water as being a really important feature of Chester Village as well.
What's glazing?
Glazing would be windows. Yes. Sorry. I tried to be as jargon-free as possible, but that one got through my.
You should call windows, but that's.
Yeah, windows are glass.
That's fine, that's good. I want to refer to it as windows.
And cladding is the word just for siding.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for including my house.
Did I?
Yeah, that's his house there.
That's under construction right now?
No, the previous slide, yeah.
Oh, okay. I did not intend for that, by the way. Did not.
You have too many windows.
All replaced last year.
Good thing before we change policy.
Nobody told me they wore out.
That was lazy.
I got lots of glazing. Anyway. Sorry. Move on.
Plus you have vertical siding.
Oh,
that's why.
That was the reason why it's in the quote.
I know why it's there.
Yeah, you're not allowed to.
I'll move
Yeah,
along.
it's in some other community.
I always want to be different.
Like,
Another theme for consideration was on garages. And this is something that our architectural team really spoke about a little bit, of a tendency for buildings to more often have attached garages, and for those attached garages in new development to be a much more prominent component of the building. So you can see that in the building under construction here, where the pedestrian entrance is actually set back behind the plane of the garage door. What we assume would be a garage door being installed on that right side. So many municipalities have a requirement that for attached garages, the plane of that attached garage is actually behind the plane of the person entrance to the house. And that's really a sense of maintaining that walkable village, as opposed to what may be more of a suburban sense of development where the vehicle entrance is really predominant. So just thinking about Chester Village as a place where people walk from place to place as a primary way of getting around. Another part of that can be to consider a certain limit on the width of driveways entering into houses. The next policy consideration is around landscaping and trees. Admittedly, the land use bylaw does have limited tools to ensure, for example, protection of trees or planting of trees. But there are options that there can be a landscaping requirement in new development. There are some options to promote that tree retention or retention of gardens in new development that we think should be considered as part of the land use bylaw review. Part of this is also the potential to advocate for tree retention within street right-of-ways that are maintained by the Department of Public Works. There is the potential to explore a tree protection bylaw and to take a tree inventory that understands the amount of canopy cover and healthy tree cover in Chester Village, and to understand in the future.
Do you want to say something on?
No, I just want to jump in on this landscaping thing. I think I mentioned this last time you were in, that one thing that I think has to be in here is dealing with like the turf. I've seen in other jurisdictions where like there's no lawn that's been replaced with aggregate.
Yeah.
I think that's not something we want to see come to this area. It's not in keeping with the character of this area, and it may have been overlooked, but I think that if you started to see that come into this area, I think that it would change. I think there'd be a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be better, because I'm seeing it emerging in other areas where people think that they can somehow get around yard maintenance and stuff by replacing all of their lawns with aggregates.
Yeah.
And it creates a different feel for that community immediately, and it's serious.
Yeah. And one way to consider this is there's often a requirement for soft landscaping in the front yard. So soft landscaping can be defined as, basically what you're looking for, which could be lawn or could be trees and hedges and gardens, as opposed to turf or crusher dust.
In short, if this is going to be the framework for like policy decisions and direction or whatever, I think we have to make sure that is in there so that we don't.
Certain amount of big trees.
Yeah, there has to be limits on how much you can put on like hardscapes and unnatural materials.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely leave that for the ongoing conversation, but that's a consideration here is along with that limit to the width of driveways that I discussed in the last slide, that certain requirement of landscape front yard, whether that be a percentage or a size limit, for example, is something to consider. There could even be a consideration of the front yard landscaping requirement being a ratio of the square footage of the building. So let's say you have a 2,000 square foot house. The requirement is you need, say, 10% of that equivalent in soft landscaping in the front yard. I'm just throwing out those numbers, but there could be
the details can be kind of shared. This slide, which is your landscaping slide, focused mostly on trees, and so that stuff I just don't want to lose sight of.
The grass.
Yeah, all that stuff.
And I think another part of this too is to think about trees in terms of their climate change resistance species. But thank you, Council. We will take that back. Moving on to those considerations around housing, and housing is really intimately connected to character. Obviously, We did hear a desire for the plan review to include some additional options for second suites on lots. And general ideas about additional housing options for aging in place in Chester. So the image here is just outside the study area in the Millennium Drive neighborhood of the townhouse development. And our understanding is that that's been a relatively successful development there. But such development is not currently permitted in Chester Village. We don't know whether we don't want to say yes or no, whether this kind of development would be appropriate in Chester Village or not. But this kind of housing option of accessible units is really quite desirable right now.
Where is this?
This is on Millennium Drive.
Okay, this is,
Chandler's Cove.
you said not permitted.
In
Townhouse
downtown core.
in the central core. of Chester Village.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Because
sorry.
this is the village.
This is the village.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But it's,
It's a little bit outside the study area that we identified for the study. Which was generally the central village core,
Yeah.
as well as the estates.
I thought it was Chandler's Cove, but I just.
Yeah.
When you said that, I had to rethink it for a minute.
Sorry. One thing that also came out of the engagement was a sense that the current zoning map gives the name of estate residential to many of the zone with large houses, sort of in the purple section of the map I showed earlier. And some felt that the name estate residential has a negative connotation or a connotation of exclusion. And so there might be.
Kind of is.
And so it might be appropriate to rethink that through the review and give that a bit of a generic name.
I would say that, yeah, that name is kind of pretentious, but I am interested, actually. I think that the estate residential zone, having service land that has minimum lot size of an acre, it's
No sense.
I don't know of another jurisdiction I've ever encountered that has that. It's that's a really big lot for a serviced area.
Yeah.
So I think the intent of that zone is to allow for like bigger setbacks from maybe your boundaries and stuff like that. And I think that managing that zone instead of just having it as area, but actually providing requirements for setbacks for like maybe smaller lots potentially, but maybe more generous setbacks would achieve the same thing and maybe allow for a bit more density and achieve the same effect. So I hope that a result of this discussion here this review will allow maybe some options that we could put back to the public and see if they're interested in maybe making some adjustments there. You know, I think if we're just trying to preserve that sense of privacy in a serviced area, maybe you can do it in another way other than just putting big areas.
Yeah. It shouldn't get any special more consideration than the rest of the village. I don't see it. I think it has to be reviewed. I agree with what you said.
Yeah, well, that's the broader review of the village plan.
I suppose that I live in the state residential area. And I think it's lived its original purpose in that regard. I think it was set that way before we even had sewer. Now it's total service.
Yeah, so
Not all of it, Peninsula is not, but
Yeah.
some of it is.
Some of it is.
I think I have to distinguish between where service and not service.
I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, we had that meeting with the minister, Lore,
Yeah.
Housing and Municipal Affairs. I can't remember what day it was. It was pretty
Tuesday,
pretty
yeah.
forgettable, but one thing I did take away from it was, you know, it didn't sound like it was, it sounded like the province was going to be highly encouraging municipalities to explore every avenue to improve housing within their service boundaries. So, you know, and, you know, as I said in the meeting, we don't want to, you know, add density to our core of Chester in a way that damages its character, because we don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, because there's something special about Chester that brings people here. But, you know, there are things we can do that still maintain that character. And I think if we don't do it at some point in the future, the province may make sure that we do.
We agree.
And I think I'd rather do that on our terms.
It makes sense to do it some places. And I think that was, I mean, I was at some of the meetings and I think it was very clear that people would like to see some change.
Well, all you're gonna do is allow for smaller size lots because of service. That doesn't mean the people who live there are gonna sell them anyway.
Absolutely. And I think the proposal to allow additional options for second suites is also a good proposal. And I think, again, one that was promoted quite widely at these meetings. And it has been for some time, so I'm glad to see that in there. Can I go back just quickly to the tree one?
Sure.
Because we've had a lot of wind and a lot of tree damage lately. And last storm in February we lost hundreds of trees.
Yeah.
How can we sort of, we're promoting trees next to houses that are eventually going to go over on the house. Unless we haven't changed it, if we keep planting spruce trees, they're going to keep going over on the house because the root systems are so shallow.
Yeah.
Is there anything around the type of trees that we might be promoting, or is that beyond our scope?
Well, I can speak towards my own expertise, which is not as an arborist or a landscape architect.
Is there is not?
Pardon me?
Is that your expertise?
No, my expertise is in planning.
Not as an average.
No,
Nor is mine.
No.
So
One.
neither of us know what we're talking
Not
about.
exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, spruce trees blow over easier than oak trees.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
both know that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good. You don't have to be an average to know that, I guess.
Yeah.
You
But
just
there-
have to have them in your yard.
And so I guess I say that probably a little bit more investigation is really needed to get to the answer that we want to have here. But there is the mechanism in the land use bylaw to, for example, allow certain kinds of trees or to promote certain kinds of trees to be planted. Another thing that's noted as a possible consideration is to require a landscape architect contribution to projects of a certain size. And that would really bring in that expertise in species selection that might not always be there right
And
now.
then we're starting to get expensive for the landowner.
That's the,
No more cheap houses.
A couple of, I mean, there's always the regulatory, that using that more coercive approach through regulation, but there's education programming. I know, having lived in the town of Truro, they had an incentive-based program every spring. They had a tree program and the town would have a budget of, I don't know, $2,000
They'd actually
to
give
pay
you the
for
trees.
half of a tree. But the trees, the only trees that were eligible were trees that were appropriate. So I think there were a lot of elm trees in Truro, large trees that became diseased. And so that they used an approach to encourage residents to plant trees that wouldn't create those issues in the future. So spruce trees, I don't think were an option in their program. So there's other ways in addition to a regulatory tool.
Yeah.
If council is interested.
I think we need to look at it, that's all. I just wanted to,
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah,
it did come up at the meetings as well.
it did. Yeah. And that's also a great thing is, I find sometimes we get really close to the tools that we use and the tools that I use most often is the land use bylaw,
Yeah.
but those promotional tools, those community tools are often much more effective. And I think we've touched on housing here, so I'll move along to the next theme that came out of our conversations. This is on the walkable village community core, what we've termed that. And one thing that's a little bit interesting in Chester Village, if you look at the zoning map, there's actually quite a large and kind of dispersed area of commercially zoned lands, which is a mix of commercial and residential uses. But what we identified through our analysis and some of our conversations was that it's really important that there is this cluster of what you might term the commercial core, and that's Pleasant Street, Queen, and Duke. And that's really important to promote if there is change in this area, that new change does have uses at ground level, which sort of bolsters the downtown feel. So what that could be termed is, what we term that kind of provisionally is a walkable streets overlay, which is, and this also really is connected to where the municipalities invested in sidewalks in recent years, that if you promote walkable uses on those sidewalks a little bit, it will strengthen that area as a destination and as a service for residents and for visitors. There was also some conversation around the Water Street conversations, and that's really led by CBCL's work with the traffic study, of the potential for Water Street to include a sidewalk or a boardwalk, which would again improve that connection to the water and walkability. Another conversation that came up was that potential for the Tancock Island ferry dock to be repurposed as a destination. So some of the ideas that came up there was, with it no longer being needed for the ferry, could either a community group or the municipality take that on as a place with events, with shops or food vendors, for example, or even a place to rent a kayak or rent a canoe, or not a canoe probably, but kayaks or boats. And sticking with the theme of waterfronts, there was some specific feedback related to the waterfront zones. So that's the waterfront residential zone and the marine industrial zone. That marine industrial zone being on the back harbor. So some of those topics for review was the residential zone's maximum width of buildings, the marine industrial zone land use restrictions, with the consideration that maybe that marine industrial zone does consider additional commercial uses. It could be even termed a marine commercial as opposed to a marine industrial use. And that again comes to some of those uses such as boat launches or seaside restaurants as an option. And then that last bullet is on considering design limits to fencing where they might impact views to the water in that waterfront residential zone. And this final category of policy considerations is a little bit more general in nature, a little bit more process oriented. And this is getting back to some of those concerns we heard from community members around overall pace of change and seeing things happening in their community that they maybe want to have a bit more control over. So we've termed this regulatory options for managing development scale or impact. And this is really lots of tool options that could be considered as we go through the plan review process. One potential that did come up is a potential for a heritage conservation district in some area of the village. And we did do some very initial investigations with this with our heritage consultant. And they found that it is something that the municipality could consider and could pursue. It would require quite a bit more analysis and community engagement to determine exactly what that heritage conservation district is and what it protects. Some of those other options to consider would also be the possibility to add more properties to the municipal heritage register. Really recognizing that we did identify about 75 to 100 houses from prior to 1920. Most of those are not registered. So there could be a program to pursue more municipally registered heritage buildings to protect those buildings. Third bullet there is something that some municipalities use, which is having specific design regulations or processes for development where it abuts a heritage building or heritage property. So that would essentially mean that if you're the owner of, if you're developing next to a heritage property, you may need to take some cues in the design from that abutting property. Another option of fourth bullet there is considering maximum sizes for houses. So that could be considering sort of a maximum footprint in certain blocks of the village, or having a maximum size for a footprint of a house being in some way relative to other structures on that neighborhood. So one example that might look like is that a new structure could only be 10 or 25% larger than the largest structure on that lot, or maybe that's in relation to the average structure size on that block. And that final bullet is a bit of a procedural question that we've been discussing a little bit with Garth's team on differentiating levels of project complexity. One thing that we were really sensitive to throughout this process is not creating unnecessary burdens on homeowners. If, for example, someone wants to put a modest addition to their house or wants to build a relatively small house, to not have lots of red tape for them to go through. And so what we've discussed is there might be these three categories determined of what we've termed low complexity, medium complexity, and high complexity projects. So those small structures or additions might be really a low complexity project. And so as an example, we discussed, maybe there's a limit on vinyl siding in new construction as a consideration. But maybe that's only for structures above a certain threshold. So if you were to build, say, 1,500 square foot house, you would be permitted to use vinyl siding. But if your house was 5,000 square feet, you would have to use higher quality materials because you're having a bigger impact on the community just through the size of that house. And so that's kind of talking about that threshold towards the medium complexity project, which might be those slightly larger structures or structures that have a bit more of an impact on the community. And those are ones where there might be a design checklist that applicants need to go through to start to relate to some of the things that were really identified through this study. And then thirdly, we have a bullet for high complexity projects, which might be unique proposals that would be more appropriate to consider through a development agreement process. And all of these are sort of large ideas, which I think need a lot more fleshing out through the plan review process. But we wanted to just bring these forward as, I'll highlight the word consideration, that these are considerations that can be brought forward through the continuing conversations.
It's a pile of stuff.
It's a pile of stuff.
So we have a planning department that's going to deal with it.
So where does it go from here?
I think I'll defer that to Garth and Chad.
Yeah, you tell me. I wouldn't have to make a decision right this second. I can tell you that.
But I mean, a lot of this, can we address Garth on this?
Sure you can. Come on up, Garth.
On the hot seat.
Because a lot of this will be used for your plan review, am I correct?
Absolutely, yeah. This will be one of the foundational pieces of work that goes into that plan review and informs plan review, along with, as was mentioned here, the survey that went out last year, and then the Highway 3 workshop that we did in-house this year. So those three pieces will be three of the most substantial pieces of work, and then
So are we finished with all the sort of the reports and public consultation? Are you going to go now out there and write that?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's I've been thinking of that over the summer as these pieces have come in and been successful. So that's my thought, is that hopefully over the winter, it will move into a drafting stage, which of course will involve the Village Planning Advisory Committee in some capacity, and then in the hopes that potentially, we're saying this on the record now, in the hopes that potentially by next summer we may, or late next summer, we may have a draft to then do public engagement with. So I agree. I think we're at that stage where we've done our initial investigations. It's time for us to synthesize something and then bring that back out for further consultation.
Yeah, what works, what doesn't.
Right.
You had good turnout at those meetings.
Yes.
I mean, good input. I thought they were great.
Andre?
Well, there's a lot of topics inside of this that sort of aggregate to become this overall control document. And what I would like to see is if you could go away with this and then meet with your committee and then take it and before you go and draft bylaws, it'd be nice if you could come back to council with like some of the chunks. So we can kind of have a look at it, because I think there's a lot of, some of us have some strong feelings about this, and it'd be a shame to
Waste
like,
too much time.
do a ton of work and really come with a big document, and then I feel like there's some big themes that you can kind of break out and deal with. And then it'd be nice to have like sort of a discussion, say, these were our considerations, this is what the committee thinks, this is what we're thinking about drafting up, what do you think, council, or something like that, just so that we can make sure we're all on the same page before you sort of pull the sheet away at the end and it's like, oh, that doesn't look anything like what we thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the staff considerations involved in all those too, like what can be even managed.
Sorry, yeah, that, if that's council's direction. That's
Well, I
what
mean,
we'll
I
do.
think
Yeah,
it is,
absolutely.
generally, I mean, you guys know better what works, what makes any sense, what physically on the ground.
Well, and we're doing this differently than we did the municipal plan review. There, we had that one committee that they were the committee when they gave the draft the okay, that's when the draft went out. So this is admittedly different. So I think these are all great ideas for discussion. I'm
Well,
happy to.
dealing with, for example, landscaping and stuff like that is a lot different than dealing with sizes of buildings, for example. Sizes of buildings have to do with a lot of things.
Yeah.
If you're doing a big building and it's in a hole, it probably has less impact on your neighbors than if it's on the top of the hill. So, there's a million considerations, things we could discuss, setbacks and the form of the building and all that stuff are like matter. And talking about that, you could have a lengthy discussion just on that one topic. So putting all this together in a document, I think could be pretty overwhelming.
Let's have a draft next year. And if we have to do little bits and pieces through the winter, so we get input on certain aspects of it, that won't slow you down.
Oh, absolutely it will.
Will?
Yes. I can't do two things at once.
Well, you gotta write it anyway.
It will support the final work, but it will definitely slow it down. I'm not saying it'll take twice as long, but there's a portion of time I'm going to have to devote to developing these options and developing these chunks that we're going to bring back. And that will be time that I'm not spending on fully drafting the policy.
Well, maybe we just discuss the options rather than have to write them out. Sort of, I don't know.
Well, I think that's what we've, I guess that I'm gonna need a little more direction, because I thought that if we're at that level, then we should just go through this report and discuss the options. But I think what Councilor Vino was looking for was a little bit more to break them out into sections for individual discussions.
I think that you could probably separate this whole presentation as it is almost already into broad topics, and then you may want to go back to the committee and seek some advice from them, and then it'd be nice if that sort of like say, this is what I'm hearing from the committee. This is how I think I'm going to put it together, and just do a little check-in or something. I know that's unusual, but this is a big deal, I think. And it's been sort of talked about for a long time. So I think that I think it could be more painful if we just do the big reveal at the end.
One of the ways we did in the early parts of the plan review was we held some workshops, joint meetings between the planning advisory committee and council. And we had them in a workshop format that seemed to work well for staff in terms of being able to.
We'll never see it.
There's a lot of restrictions in it. I just noticed one thing that you mentioned, and I don't know if you've heard it, but the lot next door to a smaller lot would only be able to build a certain size house, because the house next to them was smaller. You mentioned like 20% variation. But as a possible, to me, there's no consideration taken there for the family that wants to build that lot. You might be Tom, they're gonna build so big and they got 4 kids and need bigger house. It's that type of restriction that I have a problem with some of this. That it's very restrictive.
Potentially.
Potentially, yes, it is.
And we are talking about Chester Village.
Yes, I
the
know.
rural part of it.
Oh, I know.
And these, no, I'm just, these recommendations and considerations are based on what we heard in the community here in the village. So it's not to say that they're gonna go ahead, but I just think that it would be, I think, a totally different case if we were talking about different, different parts of the municipality.
This is very reflective of what was
I understand.
said. These meetings were excellent, very well run. Both of you did an excellent job. Garth, you were superb in these meetings, especially Highway 3. And, I mean, everybody doesn't agree on a point, but I think there's a consensus of the way they want to go by and large, and this, I think, reflects it. We have
Just the
to,
detail.
the detail, we have to see the detail. But I don't want to slow it down by having workshops. I don't want to slow it, we got to consult with PhD, of course. But if we're saying something to you that's going to add 6 months to the time, tell us, because let's see if we can make that.
We could act this out.
Rather than on the spot, I'd prefer the time to come back to council, maybe with an
Give some
update on the
thought.
plan review and some of these, because this is honestly admittedly tough. And I think internally with my director, I'm gonna have to talk about priority shifting and setting aside, and frankly, that's going to mean that other work will get delayed. But this is, I struggle with this every day, and it hasn't come, and I'm not saying it should, it hasn't come from council yet to prioritize this. So I'm not really prepared to answer this on the spot.
You go home and think about it. Come back to say this.
But we'd like to have a draft next year.
Yeah, see, this is why I shouldn't have said that.
I know, no, that's not meant to.
No, I would love to
I know
do
you
one
want
or
to do
two.
We get it over.
It's a struggle of resources, frankly. I've got 3 potential development agreements in the pipeline, so that will completely throw that timeline off. And I can't avoid those unless we have more resources or direction that one staff person is not doing day-to-day planning work. And I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying that's the reality of these.
It's the world we live in.
That's maybe the only option.
Yeah.
To get it done.
Yeah. It may come to that.
Yeah.
We get a couple more development agreements in the morning.
And we're
There
going.
they are.
Yeah, right.
We are gonna do.
So if council's happy with that, could I return maybe with
You just
a
give
sort
some
of
thought.
an update on where we are and some next steps,
Yeah.
maybe some. different
How
options
you
for them
think you
and
could
how that
actually
would
get this done?
affect the timelines? Yeah, it would probably be helpful for myself too, to go through that exercise.
Okay, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
We're gonna take 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think everybody here probably wants it by now.